Hi everyone, so lately we had those developer interviews with Rax and Rob. Here's my summary on X, and I also made a video about each of those individually. And there were some pretty interesting tidbits in those interviews. In particular, one topic that kind of sparked an idea for me that I want to talk about, which is loot filters. So there was this mention here about crafting the zero to hero an item, like you take a white item base and then you start putting some affixes on it and it becomes something really amazing. Maybe something that you cannot otherwise get with specific stats or something like that. That is not just a random drop. And I think this is a feature that is really sorely missing from Diablo 4. We don't really have any crafting in the game. Most of the item modification that we can do is just very straightforward, very streamlined, and we don't really have this whole, like a full journey with an item, basically, that we can do in other games, for example. So in order for that to work, we definitely need some new systems, and this is why I want to talk about loot filters. I think that something like this requires loot filters, which is also why I think that loot filters are very likely to happen in Diablo 4, and I just want to explore what this could look like effectively. So I have a prepared example here of what I think a loot filter should have in Diablo 4. I took a bunch of inspiration from the last Epoch loot filters effectively, where we have an in-game tool where you can set up rules with all kinds of customization, what it should look like, what it should do. You can select individual items, individual stats, and these kind of things. And I think we kind of need to go in a similar direction if you want to have something like that. And of course, we can make it even better than just like sorting out very basic items. We can make it very streamlined, very quality of life, in order to just make this a smoothest experience possible for players. Because I think even outside of this whole discussion about crafting items, it seems like we are moving in a direction where loot filters maybe don't become necessary to play Diablo 4 like they are in other games. Like you literally cannot play Last Epoch without a loot filter, or you cannot play Path of Exile without a loot filter, or Torchlight or anything. But Diablo 4 you can play without a loot filter. But it has definitely become more and more inconvenient to do so, I would say. And especially with, like very late game stages of progression, you get a lot of loot and you don't really care about any of it besides like the 1 in 1,000 piece or something like that. So we can definitely make this much more enjoyable for the players. So this is what I got here right now. So the base functionality is that, well, the higher rules should override the lower rules. This is effectively just what Last Epoch does. You put a rule at the top, and if that is in any way, for example, more specific than a rule below, for example, salvage all legendaries, but then above that you have a rule, show this legendary, then it would be shown, for example. So we have here the different things of what it can do. So show, hide, emphasize. So there's maybe a big beam, or the nameplate is really large or something like that. Recoloring, of course, we want to maybe color code the whole thing. And then auto salvage and auto sell. So both these are pretty standard loot filter components, I guess. So in that case, I think this should both be included. Auto selling, especially uniques, for example, is something that you usually sell to the vendors and you don't salvage them, because the salvage is relatively worthless compared to the gold value, at least when you're not trading a lot. Then this is definitely worth to have. It should all be in-game based. I don't want a loot filter that we have to go out of the game, filter blade on PoE or something like that. I think this is not a good way to do this, especially with also how the whole Diablo player base works and the Diablo community. I think everything needs to be done inside the game. We can't really force anyone to go out and then do some weird shenanigans. And at the end, I also want this to be a shareable feature. So I want to have a link, both that I can copy on a website or something, for my guides, but also in-game. I want to be able to just, linking an item in chat, for example, right? You could link your loot filter to someone, or, maybe people can even follow your profile and then, see your filters. PoE has something like that, but again, this is also outside of the game. It's on the forums, for example. So if that was a feature in the game, that would be perfect. Now about the loot filters themselves, so this is just some kind of mock-up here that I just put together effectively, what would I like to see. So let's imagine a Spiritborn, Kapaleka build, basically. This is what I made here. So for example, I first like show all of the like really big items for this build. So there are specific uniques that I care about. So the Harlequin Crest maybe, or the Rod of Capeleke, or whatever other unique, Midnight Sun Ring. I'm just gonna highlight them in like big bright green and maybe have some mythic sound drop. Maybe you can customize what it sounds like so that I know, okay, this thing pops up and this is an item I want for my build. Like I imagine myself, for example, making a build guide, and then it comes with the loot filter, and the loot filter is pre-configured for everyone playing that build. And you see, okay, green is, this is the thing I care about, right? So this is kind of the idea behind this. So I have like various just kind of examples like that. And here I can say, okay, I don't just want a Harlequin Crest, but I also want, one of those two GAs. So I want cooldown or I want resource, and then I just like GA the other one with the masterworking system, for example. So in that case, I will get both of these. And if that happens, I will see, okay, this is exactly the Harlequin Crest, right? So even like already just like farming the boss, and I can see the green beam pop up, I know, okay, this is the one. The same with like, for example, Rod of Capeleke. This is an item that has really large roll ranges. I think the unique effect goes from like, 0.4 to 0.75 or something like that. And then there's also some stats on this that are really important. So in that case, I say, okay, everything that is like not really close to the maximum on the unique is not highlighted, but only the top rolls, they have this green highlight color. So, I farm Duriel, and after like 100 kills, suddenly the green beam pops up and it's like, boom, dopamine. I think this is kind of one of those things that is really missing when it comes to loot in Diablo 4. It's very easy to get like any item in the game, basically day 1 or day 2, or, however fast you go when you're blasting. And you just get like tons and tons and like dozens and hundreds of copies of those items at some point. And it never really feels exciting because items are not rare, they're plentiful. And then you just wait for this like really rare, like, multi-GA, really high roll drop or something like that, which just makes the loot relatively bland. And very often, even when you get those GAs, they might not be the right ones, or, the unique effects might still be really low and so on. But here I can decide, okay, when the item drops, I already know it is the one. And this will make you feel good about the loot. And this is something that just doesn't happen in Diablo 4 almost at all, basically. Yeah, it's nice to get your first Harlequin Crest of the season. Obviously, you're gonna equip this. But if it has the wrong GA, if it is not a cooldown GA, then it might not just be that good for you. And the same with like all the other uniques, for example. So this is mostly why I want to have this sort of highlighting feature, and I think this could make loot a lot more fun to get, effectively. We're still gonna get like 100 useless Rod of Capelekes, but one of them I will just have this crazy, like, okay, this is the jackpot experience. And yeah, we need a lot more than that. Okay, then we have, for example, some other like rules that I set up here. So instead of emphasizing the Rod of Capelekes that are good, I can maybe auto-salvage the ones that are not good. So here's like one of those cases. And this is like another functionality that I want to highlight, which is like activating a rule just for like a checkbox here. So if you can do something like that, this would be perfect. So I can like preset all of the rules for a build, for example. And then, for example, as I progress, I get more of the items, and I realize, okay, a lot of Capeleke is done. I don't care anymore. I will never replace this thing. So I'm just gonna like, check this on or something like that. Or for example, early on, I will not want to auto salvage any of them because obviously, I first of all need to get the item to even make the build, right? So this is kind of like why I want to have that. And then we don't have to like reconfigure the entire loot filter. When I progress further and further, I just, check mark, okay, this is done basically. Yeah, then we can do other stuff. So for example, here are other items like legendaries, not just uniques, but maybe we can, for example, set, okay, what are the stats that I want to have on those items? So let's look at those gloves here. So I know I want to have exactly, 4 skill ranks, attack speed, crit, and main stat. Maybe I would be okay with like a life roll as well or something like that. So I would have some sort of maybe like a drop down, and then I select multiple stats. And I say, okay, I want 3 out of those 5 stats, or 3 out of those 4 stats on my legendary glove. And the last one I can just roll anyway, right? So this is like something that I think is also kind of necessary here. And similar to what I explained above, like we're gonna get thousands of legendary gloves, throughout like a season or so. But I never really feel excited about getting a glove because, well, I have to first check the stats, I have to see what it has, and most likely it will not have what I want. And in that case, I would like to highlight, the stuff that I care about. And I know, okay, this green glove drops, I know this is the one and this is the one I will use, right? So I think, again, this comes back to this dopamine argument. I want to see a lot more like this kind of like excitement about loot. And this is really, I think, what this loot filter could accomplish here. And the same can really kind of carry forward with other like loot that we can find, for example, materials. So we have, let's say, rawhide, right? Rawhide, okay, you don't really care much about it, but let's say, you know, this is something like, you know, early in the season, or maybe it's a bit more scarce this time around because, you know, the numbers always change a little bit. But yeah, maybe there's like a big chunk of rawhide that can drop sometimes, and you say, okay, I'm gonna just highlight, you know, 250 plus in one stack. You see this, for example, when you do a like a Legion event, or maybe sometimes, you know, an elite would have just a random small chance to give you like a huge stack of these materials. You know, you can do the same with weight crystals. You can even do a spark or whatever, right? So just kind of these like nice little events of, I didn't get an item, but it's still nice, you know, I found something, right? It's like picking up a Chaos Orb or picking up a Divine Orb or something like that. So I think these kind of like crafting materials can also be exciting if you look at, for example, what Path of Exile does with some of those materials. And I think this is also something I would like to highlight on a filter. Okay, and then another example would be aspects. So instead of just like highlighting all the uniques here, maybe there is also aspects that we care about like earlier on before we have the uniques in every slot. So let's say I play a Pulverized Druid and I want to put the Shockwave aspect and like highlight that with like the perfect roll. And you know, maybe this is like really valuable on the market as well, right? I don't just want to have it for myself, but I also want to trade it to other people because Pulverize is like the meta build of the season, and everyone is playing a Druid right now. And well, I can sell a high roll Shockwave to someone or something like that, right? And then similar with like maybe like some sort of like selection of multiple aspects at once. I don't want to have like a single rule for every single aspect every single time, but there should, for example, be the option to just like see every single aspect and then, you know, just checkbox, okay, those are the ones I care about, highlight those in some ways. The same thing with uniques as well, right? I want to see a drop down of like every single unique in the game that I can use on my class, and then it's just check mark, okay, ding, 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 ding. And then I can highlight that stuff as well. So without necessarily like, you know, going too far into detail about, okay, what is the unique role or something like that. Sometimes this can also be quite valuable already. And effectively, we can do like a lot of other stuff like that as well. So let's say we can do this with gems, you know, gems like started dropping again. We can do this with layer boss mats. So maybe I want to highlight those like, hey, I really need to farm Varshan because he drops my Tarasha ring. So let's highlight that. I want to also make sure I don't miss it. So there's like a loot sound for it, for example. And, you know, it just kind of feels good. Like you hear the sound and like, boom, okay, Varshan nuts, nice. And, you know, you collect this a bunch and then you go farm the boss, for example. So again, this all goes back to this like feeling good about the loot because, yeah, as long as you miss it and, okay, it gets sent to your stash and then you just take it out there and it just doesn't really seem that exciting. And you can definitely make this a lot more interesting, I believe. And obviously there could be all kinds of other functionalities, but this is just kind of like the main stuff that I came up with here for now. Now there's a few more rules here at the bottom. So this is kind of like the lower, kind of catch-all rules effectively, right? Because the higher up the rule, the more specific you want to do it, and the lower down, the more broad you want to do it effectively. And so here you see, let's say, you know, show consumables. And so like, you know, you see like, you know, the elixirs dropping, or maybe there's incense dropping or something like that. Show materials and so on. So you can just like show or hide or whatever. And then you also have, for example, here auto sell all the uniques that I don't care about. So I just select all of the uniques that I know are going to be trash this season, or that I don't care about for my build or something like that. And I just go instantly, you know, I get my gold, you know, as they drop effectively, so I don't have to pick them up and then go to the vendor and then like one by one check mark them and then sell them or something like that. I just want to get rid of them immediately. That will be kind of nice. And the same thing you can do with auto salvage as well. So anything that's not a unique that I don't care about, just basically every legendary. Let's say anything that is not 800 item power or higher in Torment 3 or higher is just auto salvaged. Like I don't want to ever see a non-ancestral item again when I'm in Torment 3, for example. There's no chance I will equip it anyway because the stats are too low. Then, you know, just get rid of that. And for example, this one rule alone, just like sorting out all the 750 loot would already get rid of like 80% of the stuff I don't care about anyway, right? So let's say you want to make like a very like low effort, easy loot builder, then this would be like one of the first things to put in there, for example. And that would already like help you a lot to like cycle through the actual good loot most of the time. And then you can go further as well, right? We can like make different conditions. So let's say it's not just like torment based, but it's also character level based. And so, for example, as I level up my character, you know, after level 15, like all the common items are just auto-salvaged. And then after level 25, all the magic items are auto-salvaged. And then after level 60, all of the rare items are auto-salvaged. And of course, you know, maybe you would have some other options to fine-tune this or something like that. But, you know, the way I imagine myself making a loot filter would probably be something like that, where I have some sort of like very generic rules for like, you know, every class, every build effectively, right? And then you would have, you know, something more specific for the build, like tailored towards the items that you actually care about. And now, for example, going back to like this topic again here with the crafting, I think this is kind of necessary to have a loot builder system like that in order to achieve this. Unless we have a very specific source of, let's say, crafting bases. So maybe they would create an entire like new loot system for that is like in parallel to like the loot that you get from the ground and from gambling and so on. Then maybe all this would work without loot filters. But realistically, I don't think it should be an excuse to not make a loot filter. I think a loot filter would definitely upgrade the game, even if it's something relatively simple, like, you know, this kind of stuff here. But I think it's very important to actually infuse the game with more dopamine on the loot drops. And this is exactly what like let's say the first 10 lines or something like that in this loot filter like system that I made here would actually accomplish. You would feel good about getting a good item, and that doesn't really happen very often right now. And exactly like how I made these rules here with like the more specific stuff up top and then the more generic stuff down below. Like for example, we say, okay, there are crafting base items, and they are common quality, because then you start making, you know, the magic and you make them rare, and then you add more stuff and so on. And you can exactly do that as well, right? We can just say, okay, emphasize, you know, a common axe that has no stats and is item power 800. And that would then overrule the other rule down here. And then this is like my crafting project item, for example, right? That would just be highlighted like this. So yeah, stuff like that I think is kind of required if we want to have like a really kind of a good itemization feature, a good crafting feature like that. And I do hope that this is also what the developers are actually working towards. In any case, this is just my concept about what a loot filter in Diablo 4 could or should look like. So let me know what you think. Let me know if there's like some really big important stuff that I missed as well with like functionality that you would like to see. But I think it covers at least like most of the bases here. So for now, this is just what I got here. This is like something that, you know, I don't know if this is coming and when and how this will look like, but I expect at some point we are getting a loot filter, because pretty much every major ARPG has one. And while I do admire that they try to make the game work without loot filters, and, you know, they're not technically required like in other games as I explained, I think it would definitely be an upgrade, and there's not really a good reason not to do it, I think. So that's just like my 2 cents on the topic for now. Let me know what you think, let me know your ideas. Like and subscribe for more. We'll see the updates for next season very soon, so that's gonna be exciting, I think. And I'll see you guys next time.